Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our the last round of stakeholder meeting with regard to pesticide disposal program, and that this is um, a very monumental initiative for the Colorado Department of Agriculture, and then in general for all Colorado agriculture community, and then all in areas of good governance and good environmental stewardship. We are really happy to have launched this program during the last legislative session, and we also have an opportunity to build this program on the experiences, best practice, and that has been already been implemented in several other states. We have done an extensive research of the various programs, how they set up, and then how they coordinate with applicators, the users, the different partners, and then including also how it's financed, and then how basically the program really run effectively. Here in Colorado, it is organized as an enterprise, which is a new venture for us within the plant industry division. But the department has an experience managing and handling the enterprise that function on its own as an independent entity. So we are very much excited, and so without much taking much of our time, we really appreciate all who have joined us today. Today's focus is basically on pesticide registrants who are benefiting, and then at the same time also contribute to the in general pesticide stewardship aspects. And therefore, we do have from our department, Colorado Department of Agriculture, the Plant Industry Division. I am the director, and John Scott, and then also we have our council, and then our Jordan is also joined us today, basically to provide and then also engage on a conversation. He's the Deputy Commissioner of External Affairs and then of Legislative Liaison. So we are very happy to engage, and then I will pass on to John Scott, who is Pesticide Section Chief, and then he basically leads this initiative, doing extensive research, experience, consultation of states and their different partners, and therefore I'll pass on to you, John. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank everyone for attending this meeting. It has been a busy week. As Wonder Ed noted, this week we've been holding our stakeholder meetings. On Tuesday, we met with our pesticide disposal companies and regulatory agencies, recycling companies, to get their feedback and input as we look at the development for the rules for the program. Yesterday, we met with our commercial applicators and our private applicators and industry representatives for the applicator industry. Again, good feedback on both meetings, and we're really looking forward to this meeting with our pesticide product registrants and industry reps. That we really want your feedback on how we can make the best program as possible here. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, Sonia, can you allow me to share my screen? I should have checked that before we started again this time. Had the same problem yesterday. There we go. Okay, can everyone see that?
Not yes, now yes.
Good, yeah. Okay. Well, let me get my screens moved around here so I'm not blocking my own presentation here. So just an overview, that's one of the things that Wonder Ed noted, for the last several years as we've led up to this last legislative session to run the legislation and get the program approval. I've been talking and working with states for the last several years, really to see how other states approach their program, what their funding mechanisms are, how they administer their programs, And I've learned a lot over the years. I mean, our goal was never to try and reinvent the wheel. We want to take the best of the other state programs and implement those and take those approaches to our program in Colorado. And again, I feel fortunate. I've been with the program with the department for over 26 years now, and this has been a gap in our program, frankly, where Colorado is one of the few states really that did not have a formal disposal program. And ultimately, even though there are other homeowner and county programs in Colorado, we've really had a gap for our commercial and private applicators to have an avenue of where they can dispose of their products. So just again, I know our registrants are probably very well versed on House Bill 1111. I think everybody's probably aware, but if you're not, May 26th, the governor signed the House Bill 1111 into law. And then House Bill 1111, the legislation ultimately created the enterprise, the department to have the authority to administer a disposal program. And some of the key elements, of course, what we're here today to really get stakeholder feedback is because we are on a very tight timeline for us to establish the rules to administer the program. And ultimately, the enterprise board responsibilities to establish a list of product exemptions from the disposal fee, to establish the product registration fees, which are going to be based on much on the product exemptions and how many products are exempted from the program. Establish applicator disposal fees. The enterprise is also charged with any other associated rules for the program administration, and then engaging with the disposal companies, approving the contracts, and ultimately, again, oversight to help for the administration of the program. Now, again, over the years, that's been a big question of how we approach the funding of the program. And again, I'm not telling anything to this audience that you don't already know, being registrants. States, if you go to 50 states, you're going to find 50 different ways that they administer their pesticides program. They all have a little bit different approach to meet their FIFRA requirements. And what I found is with the disposal programs, it's very similar. They're all kind of over the board of how they fund their programs. The one caveat that, as far as that most programs share, is registration fees are the primary function of how they administer fund their disposal programs. Some programs do use applicator licensure fees. One state I spoke to basically had their entire disposal program funded through a environmental enforcement action that the state took, and then ultimately funded their disposal program, which, by the way, talking with that particular state, they were saying those funds are coming down and they are going to have to run legislation to come up with a funding mechanism for their program in out years, because their funding is running out from that enforcement action. Some states approach some of their fees or revenues for their program through gross sales. Some have EPA grants that they utilize for their disposal program. And then there are states that have general funds that are directed towards their disposal programs. I'll say those states that have specific registration fees dedicated for the disposal program, those fees range from $25 to $50. Or again, most just budget their disposal program out of their existing registration fees. Again, that seemed to be a pretty consistent response from the states that were surveyed. And I will say that not only, over the last several years, during the Pesticide Stewardship Alliance meetings that I've been working in and talking with states, there was a survey done in 2024 from Iowa State University. There were 37 states that responded to that survey that really gave responses as far as how they fund their programs, and the services that they offer. So that was one of the data points that we looked at to try and identify and know how other states are approaching their disposal programs. Again, those that really have dedicated disposal fees, those range from $25 to $50. Now, some states, one of the states, Maryland specifically, I was talking with my counterpart there, and he said, "Yeah," he goes, "our program, it's funded out of our registration fees." He's like, "But," he goes, "there are some years that we don't have the budget. That's a low hanging fruit, and there are just years that we don't fund any disposal operations." And because we may not have that dedicated funding to go specifically to the disposal. So one of the shortfalls in those approaches where they have to ultimately not offer the disposal services some years because they just don't have the funding to cover it. And then state surveyed, they don't exempt any products from the disposal fee except for Arkansas. That was one question that we've got. If there's registrants are aware of any other states that have specific exemptions from the disposal fees, and we'll get into that question a little bit later in my presentation. But Arkansas was the only state that I was able to find that they have specific exemptions written into their law. One other thing I'll note I found kind of amazing as we really started digging at this, all the years that I've talked with other states, and they explain how their programs ran. As we got down into this last year, and I started to ask states, I'd like to see your actual rules and, where your authorities and rules are and how you administer your programs. And all but a handful of states basically came back and said, we don't have any rules. We just run it under our existing registration program and pesticides program. So I thought that was interesting. There's not a lot of states that have specific disposal rules. Now, as far as services offered, again, kind of all over the board. Many states, they have it open to everyone. Talking with those states, they say, where homeowners can dispose of products, their focus is still geared towards industry, municipalities, and agriculture. There are some states that take a similar approach to us of where their programs are dedicated to commercial and private applicator focused. Some of those states also open it and allow dealers to dispose of product. I'll say that for those states that had that as an option to allow dealers to dispose of product, those are the states that we found ultimately had to have caps on how much could be disposed of, because ultimately what they found was their dealers ultimately had such volume of product they would eat up their entire budget very quickly, just due to the volume of products they had to dispose of. And then other states, again, have the universal waste collection approach. Again, like Colorado, where they have county programs where pesticides, batteries, oil, paint, rinsates, all level of universal waste that they collect. Again, the limitations for those programs are generally limited to residents, exclude businesses, limited to smaller quantities, lower toxicity products. And ultimately, that's kind of the boat that we're in Colorado, where, a good majority of our counties do have universal waste programs. They are limited to the county residents. They are limited to what quantities and what products can be disposed of. And that's ultimately kind of what's created the need for a solution in Colorado for our commercial applicators and our private applicators, and ultimately why we've pursued a disposal program within the department so we can really meet that gap that hasn't been met for literally decades in Colorado. Now, again, as you all know, House Bill 1111 provides funding through pesticide product registration fees and applicator disposal fees. The service is going to be offered to licensed commercial applicators and private applicators. And I have as defined there because our definition of private applicators is very broad. Essentially, our definition of a private applicator in Colorado is any person that raises an agricultural crop for use by man. So technically, that goes right down to the backyard gardener that's growing tomatoes, and again, any use, whether they're using it, giving it to the neighbors. So we have a very broad definition of private applicators. So that aspect really does open it up to be available for private applicators that meet that definition throughout Colorado. Our program does limit disposal to registered pesticides. We will not accept universal waste. We're not going to be taking batteries or light bulbs or oil or any of those types of things. Products exempted from the product registration fees for the pesticide disposal registration fees will not be accepted. And then unregistered products, hazardous waste. We really wanted to capture the homebrew type products. I'll say that, this last year, as we've had an increase in pine beetle in Colorado, I saw a thing from the U.S. Forest Service that came out that was, recommending that homeowners use diesel fuel to treat their down pine beetle trees. And again, something that is not a registered pesticide, but we wanted to make sure, those aren't the types of products that we wanted to gear our program to accept. Certainly out of the gate, it's not something that we wanted to accept. And again, those can be addressed through our existing universal waste programs at the county level. Now, I'll say as we move forward here, you're going to see text that's in blue. These are questions that ultimately we have for our stakeholders. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to put all of these questions back up and open it up for full discussion. But as I'm moving through the slides from this point, if anybody does have a question or a comment, please raise your hand and we can unmute you. And so we wanted to be able to facilitate good open discussion as we go through this.
Hey,
But
John.
we will have a chance at the end. Oh, go ahead, Sonia.
Yeah, I do have 2 hands raised.
Okay. As these hands are raised, let's go ahead and address those questions. And as we move
Alicia,
through.
Alicia, why don't you go first? You'll have to unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead, Janet.
Hey, John, it's Janet with BSF. So when you say registered pesticides, does that mean because it says here the EPA registration number, does it mean that what about pesticides that maybe the registration has been canceled within the state and they're trying to get rid of their inventory? Would that still be allowable because it has an EPA registration, but it may not have an active state registration?
As the legislation was drafted, it is for active products with an active registration. So if it is a canceled product, as the legislation was drafted in that language, as we've looked at that, it does exclude products that have been canceled or are no longer registered. And
in the state.
I think that I'll just say that is a key point. One of the aspects that we've already had some internal discussions that as we get through this year, whether we need to look at going back to clarify, because I know a lot of our discussions as we went through the legislation and through the process, old canceled pesticides that may not be registered are one of those things that we wanted to capture. As we started getting to the rules process and as we really started to decipher that language, the way it ended up coming out, it really pigeonholed us into registered pesticides.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, and then Andre.
Yes, hello. Thank you. The question I have is whether this extends to 25B, and whether there are further, I guess, plans or ideas, whether this is going to incorporate other things like adjuvants and other agricultural inputs like supplements and fertilizers and biostimulants and things like that?
It is limited just to registered pesticides. It would include 25Bs because it's whether, as the legislation's written, it's either products registered through EPA, and as you know, of course, 25Bs, EPA does not register, but the state does. And so the way the legislation was written, it includes both federally and state registered pesticides. So 25Bs would be included in that. It does not extend to adjuvants and other anything other than registered pesticides.
Okay.
Robert Glass, you have your hand up?
Yeah, yes, I did. Thank you. A question on the because it to me it was unclear. I'm sorry, Robert Glass with Daikin Comfort Technologies. We have pesticide devices that are registered in the state of Colorado and other states. And so it's unclear to me in regards to, I think the intention of this is purely around pesticides and not pesticide devices like air cleaners that are registered as pesticide devices. So I just wanted to get clarification in regards to, and depending on how this is going to be done, will this just be related truly to pesticide, or are pesticide devices like room air cleaners going to be included in this because there is no disposal hazards?
No, that's a great question, Robert. And I'm going to actually touch on that on a little bit later slide, but I know that's the exemptions are a big question, I know, for everyone and how we're going to approach that. But I will say that devices are one of the classifications that we are looking at for that exemption.
Thank you. I'll wait for your further information then. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions before we move on?
Not that I see any.
Okay, super. Thank you, Sonia. So for the proposed disposal administration, again, talking with the states and with our disposal companies, one of the things that ultimately they really stressed that ensure that during the course of the disposal event, to make sure that our disposal companies know what they're walking into, that they have the proper equipment, transportation material, or containers to be able to transport the materials out. Creating a pesticide disposal registration portal for our applicators is imperative. So we really know what we're collecting, the amounts to expect at that disposal event. So we will be creating a pesticide disposal registration portal. This is the information that we've identified initially here that we need to collect: the applicator information, the product name, registration number, the type of product, pesticide that's being brought in, the formulation, the total volume, container integrity, number of jugs and totes that are brought in. So our disposal companies know what to expect as they come into that event. So one of the questions, and again, we'll see these blue questions on the slides moving forward, but one of the questions for our registrants would be if there's any other information you would like to see that we collect in the course of our, as we have folks register for these events, that ultimately may be useful for you. So again, that would be one of our first questions. If there's any other additional information you'd like us to see us collect as part of our disposal events. Now, exemptions from registration, disposal fees. Again, Arkansas is the one state we were able to identify that really has that in their rules, that they exempt specific pesticide product classes. And they approach it in that manner, that it's pesticide product classes: flea and tick collars, insect repellents, gel baits, disinfectants, aerosols not labeled for ag use, cattle ear tags, And Arkansas takes the approach of they have a flat $50 pesticide registration product disposal fee for all other products. Again, all other states surveyed do not exempt pesticide products from their registration fees. It's just built into their registration fee, and they budget out of those overall fees collected for registration to fund their disposal program. Yes, Christopher.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I see you put some questions up here already. This was something I wanted to speak to and had a few questions about, and just want to make sure and do it at the appropriate time. If this is the appropriate time, happy to do that. Or if I should wait, then that's all right too. Just checking with you on that.
Again, I want to have this as a open and free discussion. So if you want to bring up your thoughts now, or again, at the very end, we're going to open this up for full discussion. So I'm happy to.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make a comment, kind of lead into a question here that I think is appropriate at this juncture. And thank you for the overview. It's very helpful. I wanted to also build on comments that I heard during the stakeholder discussions this week, as well as the law itself. One thing that stood out to me from both the legislative process and the conversations held this week is there's a clear focus on who this program is intended to serve and benefit. The legislative findings clearly dialed in on commercial and private applicators, and I heard your comment about private applicators. I have a follow-up question on that. But throughout the meetings and discussions, we heard discussions about larger quantities of products, agricultural inventories, totes, drums, mini bulks, trailer loads of products. There was also a discussion during the legislative process, as well as language in HB 1111, that the exemption authority was intended to address products that would meaningfully benefit from the program. And as I listen to discussion, I find myself wanting to better understand the framework the department intends to make for those determinations. In other words, before we look to other states or discuss individual products, what is the department's framework for determining whether a product belongs in the program in the first place? Is the analysis based on who uses the product, whether it is part of the disposal stream the enterprise is intended to address, whether it provides meaningful benefit to the intended beneficiaries, or some combination? And related to that, importantly, I wanted to request and see if the department would consider separate stakeholder discussions focused specifically on product categories and the rationale for inclusion or exemption. It seems to me that many of these determinations are going to be highly fact specific, and it may be difficult to have a meaningful discussion about exemptions without first walking through the categories and understanding that framework that I'm asking about, and the department's reasoning for those. I'm just concerned, given how fast this will move, there won't be opportunity to discuss these products in a more deliberative way. The legislature wasn't in a position to sort through every product category during the session, and that's why the board was given this authority. And it seems to me this is the stage of the process where we should be looking at each category, evaluating evidence, and then determining which product categories have a meaningful connection to the program. I just think that type of discussion would be valuable both for the department and for stakeholders, and would help ensure that final list is grounded in the intent of the law. So anyway, two-part question there. What is the framework, and can we have some more dedicated time to walking through those?
I guess I'll start. Now, again, I don't know if Jordan or Wonder Ed, feel free to jump in here if you have any additional thoughts. Christopher, I know one aspect is, granted, obviously everyone's aware we're on a very tight timeline. So I'll say my personal initial thoughts on this and the discussions that we've had. as we approach this, looking at those specific classes of pesticides that we register, those that are very clear, it's really the low-hanging fruit as we get out of the gate here. There are certainly those products that certainly make sense, flea and tick collars and those types of products that just clearly, I don't think anyone would argue would be some of those products. If we're going to exempt, we would identify those very quickly. Beyond that scope of those products that are easily to identify, I think those are going to may take longer discussions. If we're able to have information provided to us that would clearly put a product into that classification, like a flea and tick collar or something that would make sense, I think those are the things that we're open to discuss and really consider before we have to move the rule forward to ensure that we make our deadlines to have the rule in place by this registration season. Now, along with that, and that may not be the exact answer that you want to have, but I would say, as I get a little bit further at some other considerations that I want to at least propose that we're considering as well, on if we can't necessarily address everyone's concerns out of the gate, we can, and we move the rule forward, ways that we can approach the funding and what those fees look like where it's not a significant impact out of the gate. So, and I'll get that a little bit further. And again, those are a lot of discussions that we're having internally. So I see Wonderrat's hand up. So.
Yeah, thank you, John, for basically providing our approach, and then appreciate Christopher, the engagement from during the legislative sessions, the number of consultation and back and forth. Absolutely, we are very much aware of the concern, and then at the same time also what we want to achieve going forward, and then what's the intent and then the very objective of the pesticide disposal program here in Colorado. I think that this is just still, we have not put down or we have not drafted our rule yet. And then therefore this is still a consultation, it's still learning, and then doing our research in terms of how to approach. And then our approach is number one, we have a timeline that we need to expedite our process while also not overseeing and then overpassing our obligation and then our commitment to our stakeholders to engage, learn, and then at the same time adapt. But at the same time also we are bound by time. Therefore, I think that's just, we are in a very tight timeline. John will also walk us through, to be on the same page. I think you have heard, since you attended all presentation, what to expect, and then where we have very, very short timeline. That's number one. Number two is we are also considering, what is the connection. And then as John explained earlier, we have a broader category of users who will be benefiting and then from the program, the private applicators. Private applicators are broad, and therefore that includes, a range of different pesticide categories. And therefore, what is the best way to really approach so that we are not really looking to individual pesticide, individual registration, which is really cumbersome, very difficult, and then at the same time also it's really not manageable. And therefore, that's why we basically look into what's the experience, what is the approach, and then what the broader categories are really, not necessarily potentially, but most likely would also benefit. We are also looking into, have approach different tools. We have not decided yet, but to really, expand our network of, what is the use of the private applicators and different commercial applicators, businesses who use the different categories that really are benefiting or passing on this. So that's basically we are looking into this. And then the other thing is the budget. John has already alluded as the overall operation. It's an enterprise, and therefore it's an enterprise, then the board will eventually make that decision. We have a responsibility of due diligence, reaching out, and then basically, move it forward. But it's not our decision. It's not the department or the program's decision. It is the enterprise board that is basically even upon consultation and upon its own timeline. And therefore, that is also one area. So how can basically the program run? And then with the benefit, and then of course that need to be touched. And therefore, I think these are the different considerations. I think dedicated time, this is meant to be the dedicated time as part of the stakeholder group. And then therefore, I think if there is a need, I think we can go back and then look, and I think we'll also have that. If we are not able, what I, as the division director, and then of course representing the program, we will be committed going forward. If not, even this the first time. The first round, it's very, very tight timeline, but definitely this will be ongoing. And then based on our experience, on what's coming, and then all over the in the coming years it will come. And then definitely we are committed to continue to refine, and then at the same time also sustain this program as an enterprise, going forward. I think that's basically the framework. Otherwise, in principle, John has already addressed it.
Yeah, thank you.
I would just add to that. I'm sorry. I would just add, Christopher, if you have a very specific structure or recommendations, that's where, again, not only as Wonder had noted, that's the purpose of this stakeholder meeting, but if you've got that information and you want to submit that in writing, I know we can't cover and have the full discussion, but if you have that framework in your mind, please, as part of this, provide that so we can take that into consideration as we move forward.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that. I guess I think and thank you both for that response. I think it's just critical that the regulated community understand what that framework is so that we can have a discussion. If this is the dedicated time and, we want to talk about herbicides or something along those lines that are used by consumers, then, what are the questions we are asking? And then what is the evidence to support that? Without that framework, it's difficult to move in a direction that, from a regulated community standpoint, to provide input that is helpful. So I understand that the tight time frame is part of the reason for bringing it up, but I just can't stress enough that I think having a framework in place so that we can build a conversation around it, or at the very least, the written comments, is really important. I understand, for example, the department's point that the private applicator definition is broad, but even if a category of product could be used by someone who qualifies as a private applicator, I'm not sure that answers whether the category is part of the disposal challenge this enterprise was created to address. So those are the kinds of conversations that we need to have, and the hard work, candidly, that was very difficult to do within the legislative process, because that process isn't necessarily designed to get into that kind of granular detail. That's I'll leave it there. But right now, I think we're all kind of walking in the dark because it's not clear what makes what information is going to be helpful.
Thank you, Christopher. I think, as I just mentioned, this is just a stakeholder consultation, and therefore, when we have a draft, and then when the department basically formulate the approach, because we don't have that approach, except the different ideas, experiences as presented. Frankly speaking, we have notebooks, and therefore the consultation will proceed during the rulemaking process with a draft rule, and then both official, and then so the rulemaking process in the proceeding by itself also provide that's in front of the the enterprise board that will be the decision makers, and therefore I'm sure that they will consider, and then there is also upcoming opportunities. On behalf of the enterprise board, it is really difficult to say, and then yes, I totally understand, and that's why it's just an open discussion. It's just an open, and then getting also your input will be critical important, and then at a later time also, if the department considered, and then how, and then why not also not considering, and then with all justification, I hope that will provide an opportunity ahead of time. I think it will be very really difficult to say this approach works and that this does not, because we do not have that at hand.
Right, but we do have the law that's in front of us and what the intent of that was. Wondered, can I just ask about that process, and then I'll be quiet here. So is the department intending to bring a list of recommended categories or products that will be subject to the registration fee to the enterprise board? And if so, what board meeting is that? Is it in July that will occur?
Yes, that's exactly what John will be presenting, a kind of a timeline at the end. And then the enterprise board, yes, will have its own time schedule in July. And then that will be open forum. And then therefore we'll consider the rulemaking. And then also we'll have an opportunity for a hearing. And then based on the Administrative Act procedure of both, hearing, official commenting period, and so on. Therefore, that will basically the detailed schedule, I think, will come up. It's not established yet, and therefore, because this is just a new enterprise that will be forming based on the act. So yes, we'll communicate, and then we'll net all stakeholders critical, and then definitely you are one who received the first notification of the schedule.
Thank you both for listening.
Then I have one more.
Yeah, I saw
Question?
Ryan Pessa raise his hand. So
I can't find the raise hand function, so I was physically raising my hand. But John, could you, or Wonderbar, could you both outline the timeline and what's happening when? Because the discussion between Christopher that just took place left me very confused of what's going to happen next and after that, and then what's going to happen at the July 22nd meeting that has been referred to. So like, where's our consultation? When do we have a continued conversation? I would really like a defined outline to know when we can engage further, because at some point it seems like this is our only shot.
yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get into that, and so I will talk about kind of what the path that we're on as far as in the kind of the deadlines ultimately that we have to meet here to be able to have this in place by our November deadline for our registration season.
And that will,
but I will talk through. Yes,
that
sir,
will
I'll give some
further consultation from us as stakeholders.
Again, this is our primary stakeholder meeting that we've planned. If between now and I'm certainly open to between now and ultimately when we need to have at least our draft rule prepared, which is going to be the first week of July, that ultimately to make our deadlines. But again, I'll speak to that. So we are on a very fast timeline to be able to meet our deadlines.
Okay.
So let me go ahead and continue on here, and we'll have more time for further discussion on those points. Again, some of the questions ultimately that we do want to get feedback. Obviously, we've started to have that discussion here. Are the residents aware of any other states that exempt products from their disposal program fees? beyond Arkansas, if you're able to direct me to other states that have a similar model, I will be reaching out to those states just to gather again how they approach their registration and disposal fees, and the question of whether have there been objections to registration fees funding state disposal programs in other states. Again, as we rolled out this legislation and we created a very specific, creating the enterprise and very specific program that charges disposal fees, and obviously a lot of discussion on registrants that want to be exempt from those disposal fees for understandable reasons. But I wanted, that was one of the questions I thought. Have the registrants ever questioned or objected to their registration fees and any part of their registration fee going to disposal programs that they may not benefit from, or in their mind they may not benefit from? So I think I know the answer to that. I just have not heard that. But again, I'm open to, I don't know what I don't know. So if registrants have come across that, I would really like to have any feedback on that. Kind of to your point, Christopher, are the exemptions based on a product category versus a product by product review? And as Wonder had kind of noted, we've just some of our internal discussions, a product by product review, certainly at least on our very short time frame to get the program stood up, would be very difficult to be able to create a framework and be able to approach it in that manner. And I'll say, at least from my perspective, out of the gate, Arkansas's framework of a product category is, again, low-hanging fruit on how to initially approach it. That's not my decision. I will say ultimately that's going to be up to the decision of the enterprise board on how we make that approach and how we create those categories. So again, we are looking for that input, and certainly direction from the industry of if you've got an idea on how best to approach those things. So Ryan first, and then Christopher.
Yeah, I think we're always disputing paying a tax on something that we don't benefit from in every state. But I think the key importance here in Colorado is that none of these other states have exemption language listed like Colorado, where my folks have a strong argument and should be granted this exemption, and I think others as well. And that's the key difference that I think we need to hold on to and not forget and keep at the forefront of our minds, because we can compare it to other states, but none of the other states have an exemption like Colorado that I worked with a lot of these stakeholders to get into the legislation for us to have an exemption.
Understandable. And that's I'll say that, again, depending on what side of the fence that you're on, Ryan, those states that don't have the exemption, in my discussions, they're like, hey, we don't have to worry about that. Everybody gets charged just a flat fee, and it supports the entire industry for pesticide disposal. The benefit of having that exemption language is it does give us the ability to look at those products and identify products. So I do think it's a benefit for us to take that approach and ultimately identify products that clearly. Again, there are certainly some classes of products, flea and tick collars. I personally I can't disagree with that. I can understand that approach. So I'll say yes, I understand exactly why the industry would likes that aspect of having exemptions that we can discuss and come up with an informed decision to move forward. So, Christopher.
Thanks, John. Yeah. I just kind of reiterating here, but I don't respectfully think that looking to other states is the foundational question here. I mean, I don't think there is any analog to HB 1111. You've got a program that has a lot of detail in it in the legislation. targeted at a certain product category, provides this exemption process, and also has a disposal fee on top of it, which, from a consumer standpoint, is a lot of friction to get over in order to use the program. But that notwithstanding, to answer your question about framework, and I didn't mean to suggest that framework needs to necessarily be this long deliberative process in order to build to that framework. I think what I'm saying is it would be not just helpful but critical to know what the question the department is asking before determining what product would be included. And just to answer your question about from our standpoint, the law seems clear and the legislative record seems clear that it needs to be a program that's going to benefit it needs to be a product that's going to benefit from the program. Therefore, it needs to be a product that is meaningfully going to move through this waste stream. And so if we can ask that question and look at products and even product categories and determine yes, no, then that would sort of put a playing field down, and allow a process to take place where we can have a discussion about is that going to meaningfully move this waste stream? Is that going to benefit from the program, and what is the evidence to suggest that?
And I can appreciate that. My only thought that I would add on that, Christopher, when I hear you say that, what's the evidence? I think that is a hard lift to be able to say, especially when you look at it. We register 18,000 products. Trying to show evidence for every one of those products that we determine needs to be in the program or that would pay the fee, I think that becomes a very difficult aspect of creating evidence that, okay, is my product going to be disposed of, and therefore I should have to pay a fee, versus if it's a herbicide that's a liquid formulation that could be disposed of, it could be that you could have a product that's going to be disposed of in a given year. So I'll just say that an evidence-based approach on whether it be a product by product or a product class. I don't know. Again, I don't see other states that take that approach. Again, when I look at Arkansas's approach, at least by some clear classifications that make sense, flea and tick collars and those types of things. But when we look at other products, other liquid formulations, dry formulations that our applicators, whether they be commercial or private applicators, may be using and would be eligible to dispose of, that's where I look at from a universal standpoint that ultimately, as we start the program, is more of the lens that I am looking through to, again, and this is ultimately for the enterprise to make that determination. But I'll say that is the lens that I initially come at this to make that determination. Does that make sense?
Yeah, your point's well taken. I mean, you only have the data that you're going to have. So I think the underlying point is the framework piece, and then the department and ultimately the enterprise board will just have to make those difficult decisions based on what information they have. But the framework, what question are we asking? I think is key, so that stakeholders, whether that be us or others on previous stakeholder meetings, can provide you that information to best answer that question as best as possible.
Okay. And I know Jordan jumped in here last. Jordan, did you have a comment? So I know you're on a tight time frame, so I don't want to.
Yeah, just real quickly, John. I was just going to jump in, Chris, and say, again, as we're very early in this process, the framework kind of that you're referring to, I think that's the type of information that we want to hear is what do you think should be considered by the enterprise board as they are making these decisions? Because again, I think, John and Wandrad's task right now is to try to gather that type of information from all of you so that they can put it together and bring that to the enterprise board who's ultimately going to make that decision. We're kind of walking that fine line of trying to gather this information, put together a proposal for them to consider without knowing at this point exactly what the board itself is going to be considering when it's making their own determination on this. So any information you have on that or how you think we or the enterprise board should be thinking about this would be helpful.
I'll say one more thing, and again, I'll be quiet. I laid out, I think, what is a framework that is aligned with the letter and spirit of the law. But I would just really encourage us not to go, well, this state does this, so that's what we should do. Because again, I don't think there's any state that has an analog to what HB 1111 has set up. So thank you.
Yep. And I appreciate that. And I think that's exactly the type of feedback that we're looking to hear.
Absolutely. Ryan, did you still have a comment? Okay. Let's see here. All right, moving on. Then we'll still have time for discussions here. So getting into the aspects of the disposal registration fee considerations. Ultimately, our fee will be calculated on the number of non-exempt products and our budgetary needs. Now, in 2025, we registered roughly 18,000 products. Our proposed budget in House Bill 1111 for 27 and 28 combined was estimated at 984,000 in our fiscal note. And I'll say that so just some of our during the process of our going through the legislative process and the exemption requests, or as far as products that were brought up that one I just requested or that wanted us to consider exempted. If all of those were implemented, it would reduce the pool of products subject to fees to roughly 8,000 products. I know one of the recommendations was that the program should only apply to commercial and those products designated for commercial use and ag use. That reduces it further to about 4,000 products. Ultimately, that would, with our budgetary needs to be able to run the program, would ultimately create exorbitant registration fees that we knew that none of our registrants would want to absorb, and to be able to stand up to that limited number of products to ultimately cover the total expense of the program. Again, if we were to take the same category approach to Arkansas of disinfectant wipes, body repellents, ant roach baits, mothballs, flea and tick collars, devices I've included in this, our figures reduce the pool of products to roughly 13,000 products. And then the other thing, which we're again cognizant of, and we're bringing this up as a consideration, and certainly in our first year. And I'm going to get into the timeline next of what we're looking at. But as I develop the timeline, ultimately, our first 6 months of the program are really putting the legs on the table here, getting our people in place, doing training, communication. And so in our first year in 2027, we're planning 2 events, one disposal event and one recycling event in late 2027. So that's one consideration, is for us to look at, once we've established what products, at least out of the gate here that'll be subject to the disposal fee. But based on our first year and having one single disposal event to reduce the proposed disposal contract in the first year, which then ultimately would decrease the fees that we would need to charge in the disposal fee in the first year. So that's a consideration that we're talking about. Now, again, I want to throw that out to the industry for comment as well. And then in out years, as we determine the need based on participation, we can look at multiple aspects of the products that need to be in the program subject to the fee, and then what that fee should be based on our participation that we come out of the first year with. So, and possibly again, even through 2028 that we need to consider. Ryan?
Could you please go back to the previous slide for my discussion?
Yeah.
Of the last bullet point, if all were implemented, it would reduce the pool to 8,000 products. Of the roughly 10,000 products that are requesting exemption, how many of them would not benefit from the program? I think you have great data here and great data in the next slide, but I think what I want to see and what I think we all should be discussing is how many of the 10,000 products, roughly, I'm averaging or rounding, would not benefit from the program, because I think that's the question at hand for the framework we need to discuss.
And I don't believe we have that data that we would be able to say that, Ryan. I can't kind of my previous point. I know, I wouldn't be able to say that product X will never benefit from the program. If it's a product that's available to our private applicators and our commercial applicators that they could use and potentially dispose of, I would say could be a benefit. But that's just it's information that you're asking me a question I can't possibly answer at this point. And I think we need more data and more time as we develop the program.
And I'm happy to take our specific issues offline, but the wood preservation industry is never going to benefit from this program because any disposal of a pesticide is just throwing money away. Our pesticides and the way we use them is very unique from the rest of the commercial private applicators, the way they use it.
Okay. And I know that, and I'll just say that, that's something I've been doing more research on. There are certainly, Wonder Ed, you want to say something? I'll let you jump in there.
Thank you, John. I think, Ryan, this is basically, can you outline basically the argument, and then we take it, and then therefore we can consider it. I think at this point, what we know is basically at a bigger category level, and then I think over the years there could be a possibility of refining over the years, but I think other than outlining the process of the category, which is already discussed, I think that's what we basically, and then of course the experience of Arkansas with own limitation or reservation from Christopher earlier mentioned that Colorado its own, and therefore you have to have our own, and therefore how to develop our own issues. I think that's the process to look forward. But if there is anything, we can take it, and then we can really consider during our.
Yeah, I guess in short, for us to treat wood, you need like upwards of 20,000 gallons for wood to get treated in what's called a retort tube. So we're not going to, whenever we get a shipment of pesticide or wood preservatives into a facility, it either comes in a tanker truck or a tote, and they put all those into work tanks. So if there's 5 gallons, 10 gallons, they're not just going to go find a disposal place to get rid of that pesticide because they're throwing money away. It needs to go into the tank. They need thousands of gallons of working solution, which is a fraction of a pesticide percentage, to treat the wood.
Yeah, Ryan, and I would just say to that, again, some of the research I'm looking at, my understanding, like creosote, for instance, comes in tankers, and that's the only way that it's delivered. Versus CCA and some of the other, which do come in totes and do come in quantities that would be subject, certainly within to the program. So,
agreed, but the
there's always
caveat that
the argument that could be had of going, well, an applicator is always going to use it all up, and I just know, and my background is from the industry. I know that's not the case. I know there's always product that may be ultimately that applicators may not completely use up, and they move on to other products, and so they ultimately still have product left over that they want to dispose of or need to dispose of. And I'm not saying in all instances, but I do have that experience from my background being in the industry of products that ultimately we held that we needed to dispose of. So but I think that is a consideration as far as the manner in which they're delivered, and as far as what again, creosote's one that does come to my mind when we look at wood preservatives. My understanding, that's one that only comes in tankers. That's the only way it can be delivered.
That's it. Creosote is not the only one that comes in a tanker, and let me go into a lot more detail. It depends on the preservative company that's sending out the preservative, whether it's going to come in a tanker or a tote or a super sack. Of all of that, when you have a 40,000 gallon work solution tank and you're getting maybe 100 gallons of a concentrated pesticide, it goes straight into the work tank. They're not going to scratch their head and say, well, we need to save this. No, it goes straight in the work tank. They dilute it to whatever concentration they need, and they treat with it. Now, per the RCRA, the tote you talked about for CCA, if it's triple rinsed as required by RCRA, that container is not considered a hazardous waste anymore. So we don't need to use a specified hazardous waste disposal recycling community. We can take it to other non-hazardous waste disposal and recycling. So my industry has no benefit from this program.
Okay. And again, I think those are all specific elements that, again, I think I would ask you to submit, and for each of those concerns, so we can take those into consideration. Christopher, do you have another question?
Yeah, thanks, John. Can I pivot back to your most recent slide, I think, on the disposal piece? I think you mentioned earlier in the meeting, that there is a segment, that there is a waste stream for household and things like that, but there's a gap, and that this program is filling that gap. For those other waste streams, my understanding is that there are no disposal fees for those existing programs. If that's the case, I just want to, in the spirit of providing additional data points for how these products are evaluated, if someone has a pesticide that maybe even is a similar chemistry that's used in agriculture, but they got off the shelf at a hardware store and use it in their backyard, which those are designed to be used until empty, but let's say they want to dispose of it, and they're given an option of this program versus a household hazardous waste program that does not charge a disposal fee, even if nominal, unless geography is a factor. I'm guessing that they're going to use the program that is number one, designed for that product, and number two, doesn't charge a fee. Just wanted to make that observation.
And I'll just say that our county programs, they do charge fees, and I know that from personal experience for my own county program. that to be able to dispose of products. So that's something I did actually in the last 2 years, where I had a bunch of old paint and other products. So yes, our universal programs, where some states may not have a charge. I'll say that in Colorado, at least in my own county, there is a disposal fee. And then as I was doing research on our counties, there's multiple counties that do charge a fee to the homeowner for disposal. So it's not just completely free service.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you.
Did you have another question, Christopher?
Sorry, now didn't lower my hand.
Okay. Again, going back as far as our approach and just fee considerations, again, we'd appreciate any input and thoughts on those for us to take into consideration. Now, and I see Aaron Radin, if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Aaron, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I just wanted to add on to, some of the points that Christopher has been making, that yes, while there are disposal fees at different drop-offs and, county programs, what we're largely talking about are, at least I don't want to speak fully for Christopher, but for my member products, sorry, Consumer Brands Association. So these are household and consumer products sold at retail, like a spray bottle of disinfectant, like a bottle of bleach, like a bottle of, a household pesticide. And these products do not require disposal. So they'll be rinsed out at home and put into the normal recycling stream. And there's already the packaging EPR program that will collect these packages. So again, the products that we represent or that I represent will never touch this program. So that's why the exemption process is so important. And it just, we will provide you more information. But, when you talk about fees, these products are already being charged a fee because they are going through the extended producer responsibility packaging program. So this is a second fee on these products that manufacturers are already paying for the disposal of.
Hey, thank you, Aaron. Andre?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding all of this. We're in the ag sphere, and we supply products to the agricultural sector. We do have a pesticide and a 25B registered in your state. So what I'm trying to get clear here is, are you specifically talking about, with regard to ag products like ours, whether this disposal program is dealing with disposal of the product or disposing of the container? Because someone said earlier that, and it says on our labels, triple rinse. And so if you do that and you're following those guidelines, then I'm not understanding where disposal of those containers would be relevant to us, unless you're talking about any container that held pesticide or 25B would be encompassed in this program as being disposed of as hazardous waste.
I'll say that the program, primarily when we're talking about fees, is for, let me back up. The program is for pesticide disposal, the product itself. And the program will also have a container recycling part of the program. The disposal fees that we're talking about fund the program as a whole, and then applicators will also be charged a disposal fee themselves at the time of the disposal event to help subsidize. But the bulk of the program is covered through the pesticide registration disposal fee. Now, recycling events, the contractors for the recycling events, ACRC, I'm sure you're all familiar with. Ultimately, they, on their recycling events, don't charge a fee to the state for those recycling. So ultimately, the bulk of our program is to pay for our disposal contracts for our disposal to be able to dispose of the product itself, not the container. Does that answer your question, Andre?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, moving on here. So the 2027 program goals, and ultimately we're, in the state fiscal year, we're starting in July 2026. We're technically in the state fiscal year of 2027. So, just as we're moving through what our process is and goals and deadlines that we have for the program. So starting July 22nd, that will be the first meeting of the enterprise board. At that meeting, of course, we need to establish our bylaws. We will be presenting the proposed rules to the enterprise board at that July 22nd meeting. Ultimately, at that time, they will make the determination to move that forward to publish the rule, and they will set the hearing date. That hearing date should be, don't completely quote me on this. Why is that not opening? Hang on, let me pull up my calendar. The hearing date should be sometime between the week of August 14th and 28th. My understanding, and I'm looking at my time frame for all rules for this year in Colorado. But they should, so during that July 22nd meeting, that's when we'll establish the enterprise board to establish and schedule the hearing date. Also, we'll be discussing with the enterprise board the request for information from our contractors for the disposal contracts. We'll also then, between this time period of July 2026 through 2027, obviously sooner than later, we'll begin working the process of hiring our program manager for the program, necessary staff training, develop disposal registration portal for our applicators to be able to sign up for future events. Obviously, a lot of communication and outreach, the development program materials, our website, applicator outreach and surveys that we will be working with the industry. Finalize the disposal company request for information and our contracts. Identify disposal and recycling event sites. And then, of course, by April 2027 at the latest, I want to have the disposal contracts finalized and our event site agreements in place. And then we'll be looking at from in July 2027 through December, we'll have, again, at least one disposal event and one recycling event. If it's possible to have more than that, we will certainly consider that. But as I say, that's the bare minimum that we want to ensure that we have one event of both our disposal and recycling events. Communications to the industry, getting everybody registered and prepared, the necessary information we need to get out to our applicators so they know how those processes and those events are going to work. Of course, we'll have post-event work for collecting disposal information, developing our required legislative reports. As you know, in the bill that we're required to report to the legislature in April of 2028 on our first events in our first year. And then, of course, and this is the big one, identifying program needs. We certainly want to continue to work with industry and all of you to make any adjustments. Do we need to consider further legislative tweaks or rule clarity as we move forward into our next years? So we'll be having a lot of discussions after what we learn in our first year. So that's kind of an overview of what we're looking at as far as in our timeline. And now my last slide, I'll open this back up again to really have further discussion and on the questions that we've kind of asked as we've gone through. Any additional information in the registration portal that our registrants would like to see? Are you aware of any other states that exempt products and their approach that we need to consider? Exemptions based on product category versus product by product, suggestions for other exemptions, non-exemptions, exemption approaches in general. And again, any of those, I really would like to see that. If you can provide that in writing for us to look at and really consider. And then just what other suggestions do you have so we can have an effective disposal program? What are the suggestions we need to take back to the enterprise board? So with that, I'll open it up for questions and further discussion.
Thank you, John, for outlining and then providing the context and also the strategic key areas that we would like to also hear and learn from key stakeholders. As we just indicated earlier and then through our conversation, is that we do not have any rule, we do not have any framework at hand. We are still contemplating different approaches as we basically initially thought of establishing this program. But I think other than that, I think this is the right forum for engaging with stakeholders. And then just to reiterate, this is a fee and then it's not a tax. And then I think that's the legislature's determination on which way and how to go for. Therefore, I think how to manage this fee, how so that to basically move on and establish this program. I think, throughout the process, still it's open for stakeholder engagement, but this is just with, from clean slate and then white paper that we are really be very anxious and then open to learn and then hear your concerns. So I think with this, these are the questions, but not limiting, your scope of any discussion with regard to the program.
Well, I just want to say thank you to both of you for putting this together and allowing an opportunity to engage. If there are other opportunities to have, any more granular discussions, we're always open to that and appreciate those opportunities.
Absolutely. Yes,
Robert?
Ryan? Yeah. John, go ahead. Yeah, just pass it.
Yeah, thank you, John. Question related to will then there be, I know there's a tight time frame in trying to get things done, but will the process get to a point where there's a draft of the regulation with exemptions as there may be that would be available for public comment before it would go for any final approvals?
I would say that yes, at the point that we have our draft proposed for that what we plan to move forward to the enterprise board, we should be able to provide that. And we want to be able to have the industry then certainly during the hearing process, whether we'll have the time frame to have further discussions on the draft before it's proposed to the enterprise board due to the timeline. I can't necessarily say that we'll have that ability, but once we come up with the proposed rule, we'll certainly want to provide that, and that way the industry has the ability during the hearing process also to then provide their questions or comments.
Thank you. Then would that be distributed to everybody that signed up for this webinar and or posted on website?
It'll certainly be posted on the website, and I think that wouldn't be an issue for us to be able to send out that draft to our stakeholders.
Okay, and when you say stakeholders, you mean either the people that have signed up for this webinar and others, as I don't know if there's a listserv or anything else that way.
Yeah, we'll have everyone that signed up for our stakeholder meetings. So we will have that list of folks that we can email that out to.
Okay, that would be great. Appreciate the opportunity to go ahead and review that and see what you've come up with. Again, what we the disposal program really doesn't fit the products that we supply into the state of Colorado, and so I hope that they are addressed under an exemption because it's. I mean, while they have to be certified under pesticide devices. They're not in the same category. So just would look forward to seeing what the proposed rule will be. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Robert.
John, I have a couple questions online from Mark Clapperchick earlier. Asks, allowed products are limited to either federal or state registered products. If these products contain an active ingredient that has uses that have been canceled and the current label has had these uses deleted, possibly a whole label not current, based on knowledge presented, these outdated products would then not be allowed?
As the legislation was written, it does limit it to currently registered pesticides. Once the product's no longer registered, technically it's considered hazardous waste, as I understand it. And that's it.
Okay, and then the next question that just came in, will the July 22nd board meeting be open to the public? Will the public have an opportunity to speak at the July 22nd meeting?
It is an open meeting, and I'll defer to Jordan or Wonderad. I believe that is open for the public to comment.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jordan. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, it is. It will be a public meeting, and there is going to be time for public comment at any of the enterprise board meetings.
Next question. We have more.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Oh, there we go. We have one. Go ahead, Andre.
Going back to the exemptions that was being talked about, um, is there a consideration for the nature of the product or the nature of the active ingredients as part of the exemption? Is that how that works? I mean, as far as pesticides, for example, are concerned, there's a huge range of things there. They're going to be based on class or what the active ingredients are or things like that.
I'll say that we haven't looked at it on an active ingredient by active ingredient approach much. And again, I'll say that as we've looked, for instance, at Arkansas's approach as far as for classes, those really look more based on as far as for packaging and some aspects of the toxicity, since I know they exempt disinfectants and those types of classes of products. So I'll say initially that is probably the starting, as Christopher worded it, the starting framework, looking at as far as those classes of products is ultimately where I guess our starting point is. Again, when you look at all other states, they don't exempt they don't exempt products. All products that are registered ultimately fund their pesticide disposal programs. So, Arkansas really is the only state that we've had that we could look at some type of framework of how they approach it. And so to me, that's a foundational start for us to look at our approach.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? And I realize there may be a lot of information thanks to that folks are want to provide information to us. And again, I have my information up there. Please, submit your questions and your comments, recommendations. Christopher and Ryan, I really appreciate your comments today. And I would ask that you provide that in your thoughts and suggestions in writing. And my email is there on the screen, so everybody please take note of that, and please submit those questions and comments, suggestions directly to me, so we can take those into consideration as we're moving forward and ultimately come up with the rule foundation that we want to kick the program off with. So and propose to the enterprise board. So.
And John, just to be clear about process, what the input that you're inviting right now is more of an informal process leading up to the July meeting or beyond. I just want to make sure I understand, deadlines and things like that. So we're getting the information in a timely manner.
Please submit those your comments and suggestions as soon as possible, because we will be working we'll take those suggestions and comments into consideration for the draft rule that then will be proposed. And once we have that in place, and we're preparing to ultimately present that to the enterprise board on July 22nd. That's going to be between today and July 22nd. It's going to be those comments and suggestions that's going to help us form that draft rule that we'll be presenting to the enterprise board.
Okay, go ahead.
I will say beyond that point, so once we come up with that draft rule that we present to the enterprise board from July 22nd, the next opportunity really to make those changes and provide comment would be at the hearing for the enterprise board to take into consideration, and whether they make any determinations to adjust the rule or make any changes to what's proposed.
Okay, I've got a couple more. One of the questions asked for disposal then should be if the product is currently registered. I guess that's not a question. That's more of a comment. And then the next one is, will the presentation of transcript be made available to today's attendees of the webinar?
Yes, the presentation will be available. And then we will be posting the, we're recording this, so this will also be on our website, because it is available to the public. It's a public meeting. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, well, if there's none, then Wonderette, I think we can probably conclude the meeting. Again, I really want to thank everybody for your attendance. I really appreciate the conversation and the comments. There's a lot of things for us to consider. And again, I just appreciate you all working with us. Again, our goal is to make the best program and that it is beneficial to everyone. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. And then on behalf of the Colorado Department of Agriculture and then the Plant Industry Division, I want to thank you all for taking your time out of your commitments, daily job, and then all other responsibility to contribute to here as the concept of the pesticide disposal project. And then one issue is that this is just an open forum until the draft rule is introduced. Still, we are open to consider any input in an informal manner, so that we can inform us, and then we can deliberate on and get back to you. Once it is introduced formally, and then it will follow the regular, the official formal process, where that the enterprise board will have its own communication platform to all stakeholders, and then as John outlined earlier, we'll also maintain this stakeholder group as well to our previous and then already established list, and therefore we'll also send out a notification, and then of course we'll have its own website within the Colorado Department of Agriculture or as an enterprise. Definitely, that's also one thing to come up in the future as well. But we'll have its own platform to reach out to stakeholders and users in all aspects of communication. I would like to again thank you all, and then for your engagement. And definitely, we understand your concern. We understand the sensitivity of how to accommodate, how to move forward to our best ability and to the best interest of the Colorado, the users, the beneficiaries, and then all stakeholders. I hope that we'll come up with a workable, and then that also address all concerns, the rule and then a program that can serve us all. Thank you all, and then we still have time, but definitely the proposed. We have not, in terms of the appropriate time. I see question dropped. Do you have an approximate timing for the draft proposed rule? Definitely by July 22nd or a few days earlier, we'll need to see the date. But by that time, you will have the draft rule sent out and then posted in our website, and then also so it will be made available as well. So I don't have exact this date, but definitely it will be made available earlier before June 22nd or before the enterprise board convene. So with this, just we end our today's stakeholder meeting. That will also be the end of our open consultation stakeholder meeting. And thank you all, and then have a great rest of the day to you all.
One more question, Wanderad. Do you have approximate timing for?
Yeah. I addressed that.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
I missed it, sorry.
No, that's all right. Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.